Hey y'all, hey, it's JJ Conway. Welcome to Building Wealth Together, where our goal is to help you walk in abundance and leave a legacy. It's Wealth Building Wednesday, where we answer your money questions with style and grace. To ask your question, go to buildingwealthtogether.com and click Ask JJ or leave a voicemail at 1-833-4-ASK-JJC. Let's get into it. First question out the gate. Okay, this is somebody who has a fair amount of debt. They have way more debt than they're making. Makes about $35,000 a year. They've got 58 in debt with another 75 in student loans. And their thing is they're at a working for the government, so they have great retirement. Although I don't know how great your retirement's going to be if all you're making is $35,000 a year, unless you've really been banking it. The thing is that they're saying, well, if I work here 8 more years, I'm going to qualify for public service loan forgiveness. Now, I don't know what state they're in. I mean, I could go parse out that data, but I've specifically put these questions like this so that I don't have all that data. It's easier for me to read. And I don't even know if this is a he or a her, honestly. But the thing is, most of these loan forgiveness programs actually don't work out. Okay. Most of them don't work out at all. You got to know that. And so the only future you can control is the one you have access to control. And in 8 years, you don't know what those plans are going to be like. In 8 years, you don't know if you're going to qualify. I think the most recent stat that I heard of is less than 1% of people who are in who have met the requirements for loan forgiveness programs actually get their student loans forgiven. Okay. And so I'm kind of like, I really hate for anybody to bank on that. All right. What I would be willing to say go for is if your company reimburses you as you go for your student fees. So you pay for one semester, you get A's and B's, they reimburse that. Like, to me, that's a very dependable thing. Because if you know after the first semester, if they don't do it, well, then you just don't do it. Right. But here, this is not necessarily a good situation. This is a situation that can be turned around before retirement, but they've got another $28,000 of debt on a land loan for their house. And, they've got properties. They're mentioning their parents' properties. I don't know if they've inherited or not. It sounds like they may have inherited it, but even if they sell it, it's not going to get them out of all the debt. So now my take on it, I would kind of wonder what your family would have wanted you to do. I think most of the time, the reason our family leaves us something is so we can have a better life. And unless, this is a difficult one because it's not enough to pay everything off, but unless it's a property that you want to move to, in which case you would sell yours, I wouldn't hang on to it with all of this debt when you're almost 50, because you've got to be able to live on whatever your retirement is. And right now you can't even really make all of these ends meet and pay off your debt before retirement off $35,000 a year. So I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be negative. But I'm saying this is going to require some sitting down. I would like you to reach out to me because there may be some more details here. Let me back up. Their terminology in this is like, oh, well, I don't really have anything. I mean, I have this, but I have this, but I have this, but it's going to be forgiven in 8 years. And I have this, it's paid for. Oh, but I do have a debt on the land. And so what I'm seeing in this, and again, you can't tell tone from email, but what I'm seeing in this picture is this person has a very optimistic, rosy view of where they're at. And from a financial planner standpoint, I don't have a very rosy financial view, very, very, very rosy picture of where they're at. If they want to get where they need to go, they're going to need to buckle down and they're going to need to make some changes. They have enough time. They don't necessarily need to give up their great job and with their great retirement plan, but they do need to make some course corrections now so that when they hit retirement age, they'll be good to go. All right. Sometimes, I had somebody one time, and this is another person that we weren't a good fit for, and that's okay. As a coach, sometimes you're not a good fit for everybody. But I had somebody one time and they were like, yeah, well, we don't have that much debt. And I'm like, do you realize you guys make $50,000 and you've got like $65,000 worth of debt? Oh, well, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. And then they were talking about, well, we have really, really great credit. And I was like, well, what's your credit? And they were like, oh, it's like 540. And I'm like, what do you say to that? And I'm like, look, I'm not trying to be mean, but that's not great credit. Oh, well, my credit is good. My credit is good. I'm like, no, it's not. And I felt so bad, but I was just like, I can't let you walk away believing that. But sometimes we don't see things for what they really are. You know how I'm going to give you an example? I'm going to give you a personal example that has nothing to do with money, but you're going to identify with it. I have recently seen pictures of me from last year, and I've compared them with pictures of me from this year, and I had no idea how heavy I was this time last year. And I know that this time last year I had lost weight. So for those of you who are new to me, especially those of you on Clubhouse, for those of you who are new to me, I was in the military. I retired from the military last year. And I had in 2016, 2015, November 2015, I had an emergency C-section. 6 months later, me and that baby were rear-ended. So I had complications with that, and plus the complications with the C-section. I couldn't lift my left arm for a while. So I thank God for physical therapists, because, they gave me the use of my arm back when I got to my last base. And I was in the middle of PCSing too, right? Like, so I'm moving cross country. I can't lift my arm, right? And what a ridiculous time. But because of all that, I put on some weight, and I get to my next duty assignment, and I'm heavier than I want to be. And then 8 months later, I'm rear-ended again, and this time with cognitive damage. So now I really can't work out because I need to give my brain space and time to heal. And oh my goodness, I put on so much weight, but I didn't realize it, because in the mirror, I still saw me. I still saw me who was a finalist for Miss Veteran America in 2014. I still saw me in my wedding dress at the end of 2014. I didn't see me as I really was. And I didn't even really see me as I was until I saw those pictures. And not even in the moment, it's years later. And it's like, wow, I can't believe how big I was. No wonder people in the military kind of would give me the eye or ask if I was a reservist, or any number of little digs that they would do. I just didn't see myself that way. When it comes to finances, a lot of times we don't see ourselves like we really are. We see ourselves like we used to be. We see ourselves like we want to be. We see ourselves like everybody else around us. Like that was another thing that I had, in the military, everybody around me was so petite. I didn't realize how big I was because I never saw anybody so big. It never even occurred to me that I was so big. I was fit. I always got, 95, 90, 97 or whatever on my fitness test. So I wasn't worried about my weight. And I'm like, oh my goodness. I took pictures of at our retreat in Galveston last week that I hosted. Oh my goodness, it was so much fun. But I took pictures of my retreat, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm huge. And to know that I'm feeling that way now compared to year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I was even bigger. Money can be the same way. So you have to look at the results. You have to look at what's really happening. And you can't play this game of, oh, well, it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. You got to deal with what it is now. And one of the things I always tell you is you've got to deal with how things are right now. You don't want to make the mistake that me and so many other people made, where we thought it was going to work out. So we just kept going, and we ignored the problem, and then all of our money's gone. And now we're at rock bottom. So sometimes you really need to get that financial coach in to help you understand why you're not achieving your financial goals. Next question. Wow, this is a pretty involved question. This is a multiple point question. The person has a 2-year-old son. They're going to go to a private school for a couple of years before going to public school. And this person wants to buy a house. And then they're thinking, well, maybe I should rent until they go to a public school. You know what? I don't know where they're from, but I know in several of the places I've been stationed, you put your kid in private school to get them ready so they can qualify to go to the charter school or magnet school or whatever upper level program. Like my son, he received Fairfax County level 4 advanced academic program services. It's the top level. And he got that in starting in third grade. So we moved to be closer to his new school. So I understand the situation here. So there's a couple things going on in the situation. The son has received some money, and it's in a certificate program that matures this summer. And so they're wondering what to do with that money. And then they're also wondering whether they should buy a house or just rent until the child moves to a different school. And then the other one is they're going to, they've got a lot of debt paid off. They have some extra money. What should they do next? Okay, so I'm going to split these questions. I'm going to do if this is your question today, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to split off your questions. Let's talk a little bit about private school and what to do with money. If you've got money for children, okay, and you want to put it in a 529 plan. I love 529 plans. I think they are excellent vehicles for saving for college. But what a 529 plan will not do, a 529 plan will not allow you to use their funds for secondary or K through 12 private school. A Coverdell, an education savings account, which you can only put $2,000 a year in, that will allow you to use those funds for that kind of education. But this person wouldn't be able to put all of that money in there if you know that the child is not going to need the money for the next 5 years and you want to invest it in the market. Cool. But in this case, the time horizon to investing is so short. I personally wouldn't put it in the market. I would actually either roll it into another CD or put it in a money market or something that's going to give you a guaranteed rate of return, and you're not going to risk losing the money. The reason I say that is because the market goes up and down. It has a cycle. And every market goes up and down, just like every business has a cycle where you have more business, then less business, then more business, then less business. And with the stock market, it goes up and down, but overall it trends upward. But you really need a 5 to 10 year period to guarantee that you're going to get a trend upward. Okay. And so really even a 10-year period, and there may be moments where it goes down, but it's overall, if you wait that long, your trajectory is up. So even if it goes down, generally speaking, it's not going to go down so far as where it was when you started. Okay. But you don't have that kind of time in this situation. You got 2 years. So I would roll that money either into another certificate that would mature closer to when you need the money, depending on when pre-K starts, or if you're going to do, because some people do pre-K, some people do pre-K 3, I don't know what this person's going to do for pre-K, but mine did K4, and he'll start kindergarten next year, this coming fall. But some people do K, 3, 4, and then they do kindergarten. So depending on when you would start preschool, you don't want to tie that money up too much, but I would not risk putting it in the market. Okay. So that's the first question. Second question has to do with, should I buy a house or rent? And that's going to depend on where you intend to live later on. I am not a fan of buying a property that you're only going to be in for 3 years unless you can pay for that property in full and you intend to rent it out when you move. I love that policy. Okay. I love that. Or if you know that you'll be able to pay it off in 3 years and you put like 50% down or something, and you'll be able to pay it off before you move again. And then you want to make that a rental property. I love it. That's one of the strategies I teach. Right. So I love that idea. But what a lot of people do is they go in, they get a FHA or VA loan, and they think, oh, real estate always goes up and I'm going to be here for 3 years. I'm going to tell you something. Being in the military, every property that we were only there for 3 years, we lost money on. Every single one. And we had some that were so far upside down that we couldn't sell. So we got stuck with them, and so after a while, those brought some profit, but it was a long, hard road. So I love real estate. I think real estate is the fastest way to build wealth. If you don't have a long time before retirement, and you're willing to do the work, you can build wealth quickly with real estate. However, I don't like people to go into debt because you just don't know what the market is going to do. And in 3 years, there's no guarantee that you're going to get your money back when you move. I know people don't like to throw away money and rent. That's something that we all feel, we feel like that's almost un-American. Okay. But I'm going to tell you what, when you buy a house, and you got to replace the roof, or you got to replace this, or you got to replace that, or you have a big hailstorm and then you discover that your deductible is 1 or 2% of the purchase price of your home. Okay. These are things that unless you have good money set aside in savings accounts, you're going to be eaten alive with the house. And if you don't know where you're going to live in 3 years, my personal preference is rent something small that'll just tide you over until you know what the end's going to be, and stockpile as much cash as you can. Because if you stockpile as much cash as you can, then when you know where your child is going to be going to school, then not only can you freely move there and you have the money for a down payment, but then you also have money to outfit your rooms and decorate and put all the nice things in it that you would want to have. Oh, I remember the days of buying the house and not being able to afford to put anything nice in it. Anybody else been there? Oh my goodness. All right. So that's the first part of the questions. The second part of the question is about paying off their student loan. The reason I separated this is because the first part of the question applies to a lot of people, and the second part of the question applies to a lot of people. But there's a machination in the middle. For this individual, because you have student loans, I absolutely would not recommend buying a house. I would recommend paying off those loans before you buy a house. I really would. I know they're a lot of money because I'm reading it here. It's a lot of money. And it's like, oh, well, just don't worry about it. No, get that knocked out. You do not want that hanging over your head. And let me tell you something about kids in school. Their school and their programs and their activities only get more expensive as time goes. And believe it or not, your kids need you more and more the older they get. My teenager needs me just as much now, if not more so, than he needed me 10 years ago. All right. As far as being there for him. And it's hard to be there and be present for a child when you're so worried about money. Okay. So the second part of the question is, I've paid off a lot of debt. Whoop, whoop. Good for you. $150,000 of debt. I love that. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Guy has a little bit of money left, and should they start paying on their student loan of $149K now, or should they go and get their house and all that kind of stuff? Because one of the things that this person's concerned about is making sure they set their son up for success, not to make the mistakes that they made. And those of you who are new to me, you may not know this, but that's one of the things that really drove me when I first started my business. I wanted a business where my children were never going to be sleeping on another moldy basement floor. I wanted my children to have the ability not to have to spend the night in a Walmart parking lot, or have to call themselves car camping because mom couldn't afford a hotel room when we went to the meetings or when we went to visit somebody. Okay. I don't want my children to have to live like that. Now, if they want to make their own mistakes and they end up living like that anyway, well, that's on them. But I want to give them a better life. Okay. And so I understand this. Well, but at this age, at 2 years old, let me tell you, that child doesn't care how much money you have. That child doesn't care what kind of house you live in. That child doesn't care what kind of amenities you have. That child doesn't care what kind of clothes they're wearing. Now, if they're like my oldest, they'll start caring at 5, but at 2, they're not caring about all those things right now. All they care about is that when you come home, you're loving on them, and you're snuggling them, and you're watching with them, and you're playing with them, and you're all about them. That's what they care about. Okay. And so I would say now is the time. Now is the time to really knock that out. You paid off so much debt in 2020. And I don't know if you sold some things or what, but you did so much in 2020. Stay the course, knock the student loan debt out before your son starts kindergarten, and then we can work on your home. There are so many ways to buy a home that don't require taking a loan. There are so many ways to buy a home that are cost effective. There are so many ways to buy a home without going into huge amounts of debt. I know it sounds hard to believe, but I promise you it's true. Okay. So worry about getting out of debt, worrying about building up that 3 to 6 month savings account, and then let's worry about getting the house. I promise you it happens very quickly. People are so shocked at how quickly they can build wealth once they get out of debt. And now all of that income goes towards, okay? So I think you can do it. Great question. Thank you so much. All right, next question. Need help planning for retirement. They don't have much and they're 48 and 47. Okay, so this is an interesting question for me, because if you've got a decent income and stable health and you've got about 20 years to invest, that if you can do that, then you will be able to save enough to maintain your lifestyle. If you can live on a debt-free lifestyle where you're investing 15 to 20% of your income, you do that for 20 years and you'll be okay. And at these age points, you might have to work a little longer, but you can be okay. Now, I don't know where your health is. I don't know what your job stability is like. I don't know if you're in a toxic environment that's eating away at your well-being and you just need to get out of there. I don't know all those complexities, okay? So each of those things adds a nuance. If you don't have the 20 years in the market to invest, or you are not able to reduce your expenses to the point where you can invest 15 to 20% of your income, now we have to do some additional work. And it's going to be determined by what is important to you. So for example, if you want to retire in 10 years and you have no nest egg at all, but you want to retire in 10 years, well, I can teach you how to invest in real estate and you can be financially independent in 10 years. But it's a lot of work. Now, if you're in your 20s starting out, and you want to invest if you want to invest $100 or $200 a month in the market, and you're in your 20s right now, when you retire, you'll be a multi-millionaire. Easy peasy. But some of us, we were either hard-headed or we had too much fun, or we gave all our money away to some smooth talking man, and we aren't in that position. And so you have to determine what kind of lifestyle you want, what kind of wealth you want, and what you're willing to give in return. If you're willing to do the work, you can be financially independent in as little as 7 years. In fact, if you're debt free, you can be financially independent in as little as 3 years, but it takes work. It's not easy peasy. It's not an easy button. It's not a viral video. Okay. So that's what I would say is, without more details, that's how I would answer you there. Invest even at 48. You got 20 years, that puts you at 68. Invest 15 to 20% and you'll be okay. If you want to accelerate that, let's learn some other techniques, such as investing in real estate and things like that. Okay. Now, let me just add something in here, because I know somebody's going to come in and they're either going to put it here, or they're going to put it in the thing. In fact, let me just pull that up. If you want to ask a question, you can either drop a comment here, or if you want to be anonymous, you can send it in to this link, jjclink.com/askjj. If you want to invest, what is one of the things that's so popular right now? Day trading and all these apps and getting into the crypto. And I always find it hilarious that people come up to me, they're like, wow, I made $3,000 in my first week. And the next week, wow, I made another $1,000 in my next week. And I always think to myself, okay, let me see what happens when you try to pull that money out. I'm not going to burst anybody's bubble right now, but there's a lot of people who have vested interest in making you feel like you are making a lot more money than you really are. Is it possible to make good money with techniques like day trading? Absolutely. If you'll go in there and you'll be disciplined about buying something and selling when it goes up a little bit and recouping your cost, and you keep incrementing like that, you can make a lot of money. You can absolutely make a lot of money, but most of us don't have that kind of time and focus and ability, or we don't have that kind of discipline, or we don't have that kind of personality that will do the research we need to do to know what's a good investment or not, or to see what's going on and happening, or to, a lot of times people get too greedy. They ride that wave, and they're so excited and they don't pull out because they're like, well, it could keep going up. And then they don't pull out. And then now the market now that stock crashes. Okay. So there's a lot of nuance when it comes to things like day trading. I have rarely found anybody. I do know people who have made good money doing it, but I've rarely found that most people who are watching a show like this or listening to a podcast like this will actually go forth and do the work they need to do in order to do it. And the other thing with something like that is, if you're going to use an incremental strategy like that, you really need lots of money to work with. And so, there's ways to pool funds and get money, get your friends together and really make something happen. There's ways to do that. but I've seen more people fail at it than succeed. So even though I know it's possible to succeed, it's not something that I teach. Okay. I think it's always important to acknowledge things like that. I always chuckle when I'm listening to other financial planners or other financial coaches who talk about all these different esoteric things that you can do. And then you ask them what they do and they're like, "Well, they live a debt-free lifestyle and they invest in mutual funds and real estate." And it's always funny to me because a lot of people will teach you all kinds of things that they themselves don't do because it's either too complicated or it's too expensive or it's just too much work and energy and they just don't want to do that. But they'll teach you how to do it and you'll make great money teaching you how to do it. But they won't do it themselves, or they did it at one time. Like there's a lot of things I can teach you that I did in real estate investing, but I also don't want to keep doing it. It's like wholesaling. There's a reason I have a wholesaling class. I teach people how to wholesale so I don't have to. They wholesale and bring the properties to me. I call that a win-win, right? All right, let's move on to the next question. I think I've actually talked to this person previously, so I'm really surprised to see this question here. Okay, or it's just somebody else with the same question. This person has a lease. The lease is almost up. They're over in mileage, and they know they're going to have to pay for it if they turn it in. Their bank says they can buy it at 5% for a payment that's slightly less than their lease. And most of the time, people like me are going to say, buy a used vehicle outright. They don't feel comfortable doing it. Okay, so yeah, 66-year-old single female. So this is not somebody who feels like they can do that. So it is a she. Does not feel like they can do that. Doesn't have someone who can assist with transportation or even advice when there's a breakdown. And I remember being there, y'all. I do remember being there. Okay. And they're like, well, should I go ahead and buy that or should I look for something else? It's going to be hard for me to stay under that amount without getting something that's really old and beat up. And I understand where you're coming from. In fact, I know myself when, before I remarried, I remember how afraid I was for me and my son when my car would just cut off in the middle of the road. I mean, there's nothing more scary than you're in the middle of traffic and your car just cuts off. And you're at the mercy whoever's behind you to pay attention and not hit you, right? As you try to get off the road. And so I understand that. I am not a big fan. I'm not a big fan of car notes. I think what I would rather do in this situation is sit down and brainstorm some ideas. However, I have had clients in the past who turned around and bought their leased vehicles, paid them off, and then rolled on. One of the advantages of buying the car you already have leased is that you know the car. You know if it's a good car, you know if it's not a good car. And if it's a good car and you already kind of have a relationship with the car, like it squeaks and beeps and you know what works and doesn't work and you know how well it fits you or doesn't fit you. If it's a fit and it's a good solid car, then that could be a good, well, I shouldn't say investment because investments are things that make money and cars don't make you money. But they don't say how long the loan terms would be. I'm very, very leery of these 84-month and longer loan periods that are being offered right now. Okay. And so I would do what you can. If you know the time is coming up, I would do what you can to try to save up and buy the car outright. I don't have any information here. I don't have any income information to know what they're at and whether or not they can do it, but they really want to stay where they're at. And, I just don't want you to go into your most impactful years of life tied down by debt. Get with me and we can talk about that a little bit more. But in general, I'm going to tell you guys right now, in general, if you can save up and buy a car, even if it's not the greatest car, okay, it's going to be better for you financially than paying for a car that you have a note on, especially with these crazy long notes. All right. And so I understand what it's like to be by yourself and not have people that can help you when your car's breaking down. It's breaking down all the time. It's the scariest thing in the world. And then even when you have friends who can help you, like I remember the first car that I had that was, when it was nearing the end of the second car that I had, when it's nearing the end of its life, I had really good friends who just helped me so much. They did so much for me and my son, and we had just become single family, and I was still adjusting to not being married anymore, and they just really took me under their wings, and they did so much for me. And every time my car broke down, my friend's husband would be there and he would fix it up, and him and his friend would come fix it up, and in the middle of the night they would come fix it up, and I'm so thankful for that. But I'm gonna tell you I remember feeling like these people are going to hate me forever because I'm always so needy. And so two things I'm going to say on this. If you will make a commitment to your future, and by commitment to your future, I mean, if you will make the commitment that I am not going into any more debt because debt is not helping my future. At 66, you don't have time to mess around. You have to be free in time, space, and money to be able to do what you were created to do. This is your time. You're about to walk. The 70s and 80s is the most significant and impactful time of anybody's life. That's what the surveys say. They surveyed all these people, thousands of people in nursing homes and other places, and asked what were the most significant years of your life. And it was the 70s and 80s. And I don't want you to get tied down with all this debt and all these excuses. I want you to find a way. And when you make a commitment to yourself and you say, I'm going to do what's in best of my financial future and I'm not going into debt, I promise you the doors will open up. I've seen it happen over and over again. The doors will open up for somebody to help you. The doors might open up for someone to give you a vehicle. The doors might open up over here. The doors might open up over there. I don't know how they're going to open up. I just know that I've seen it happen over and over again. And I've even seen it in my life. I did not earn $845,000 of debt. But somehow what I did multiplied and opened up doors, and this happened and that came down and this and whatever. Boom. It worked. And I promise you, making a commitment to your future to eradicate this debt and stop being in bondage to other people will work for you. It's time for you to be bold and step into the life that God has called you to live. All right. On that happy note, I'm going to say goodnight for tonight. Thank you all for being here. Y'all take care and be blessed.
Love the podcast? Be sure to like, subscribe, and forward to 3 friends. You can ask a question or take a life-changing class at buildingwealthtogether.com. Now, go walk in abundance and leave a legacy.